Good evening or good morning, everyone. I'm Will Robinson Smith. Welcome to our live coverage here at Spaceflight now of the Starlink 12-8 mission, the latest orbital launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Hope you're all doing well. I've had a good, productive week. Have something fun planned for the weekend. We appreciate you starting off your weekend with us here at Spaceflight now, getting ready to see the latest Starlink mission lifting off from the Cape. 21 Starlink V2 mini satellites are on board this particular Falcon 9 rocket, which will be heading in a southeasterly trajectory once it leaves the pad there at Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. We'll give you more detail on the trajectory and the payload and all that jazz as we continue on through the countdown. Currently T-minus 58 minutes, 6 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket tonight. Want to welcome you all in here. As you're settling in, if you would do us a favor, be so kind as to hit that like button, share the stream. Allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we get things rolling in this overnight launch. Also want to thank the team of folks that help make these live launch opportunities possible. First off, thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast tonight. Our normal launch photography duo of Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane are off with this launch tonight, but we are very pleased to be joined by friend of the channel, Mr. John Pisani. Appreciate him stepping in and helping us out tonight with tracking duties here at the Cape. We'll also be joined by more of our regular haunts, our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. I also want to thank our moderators in the live chat, helping to hold it down there. Thanks to Callistia Lee, Jeff Hansen. Just scanning to see if any of the other mods. Rick Donner, hello to you. Appreciate you being with us in these overnight hours. Aussie Space Girl, much more respectable hour down there in Australia, so appreciate you being with us tonight. If you see any of the other mods cruise on in over the course of this countdown, good evening, Astro Joe. Be sure to give them a big old hello. We're, of course, powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube who help make these live launch opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like Sulfur for Lunch, I Am Lita, The Rocket Girl, Russell Jones, Cumulus Granatus, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to our member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch lift-off moments from here at the Cape in 4K. Speaking of that member community, I want to thank moderators Astro Joe and Callistia Lee for growing our community a little bit here tonight. Astro Joe gifting a Spaceflight Now membership and Callistia Lee gifting 5. So to our 6 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Astro Joe and Callistia Lee in the live chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. Last little bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space or space flight, or just want to offer some support as Cindy Kirkman just did, you can go ahead and use the YouTube Super Chat feature. And not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, as always, greatly appreciated. Currently T-minus 53 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. Maybe hearing the wind. It's quite noisy tonight, but should not be an impediment for a launch today. Talk a little bit more about the weather in just a moment here. (45th Weather Squadron forecast an 80% chance of favorable conditions for tonight's launch of 21 Starlink satellites. Of the watch items that these launch weather officers are keeping tabs on include the cumulus cloud rule and the liftoff winds, the potential violation. Taking a look at some of the satellite data you're seeing here from the GOES East satellite. Look at the cloud cover over Florida's Space Coast. Well, there have been some clouds in the area. It has been thinning out over the last few hours here that we've been out here at the press site. So hopefully for those who are in the area of Central Florida and on south, should have somewhat decent launch viewing. Not exactly picture perfect, but clouds do seem to be decreasing in their thickness. So hopefully, if you're up and awake or have some friends or family who are in our neck of the woods tracking tonight's launch, they'll be able to see it with their own eyes. But if not, that's why we're here for you. As we progress towards the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket, the 20th for SpaceX so far this year, let's go ahead and take a look at the countdown timeline, the sequence of events that we're looking for as SpaceX is preparing for the liftoff of this particular Falcon rocket. At about T-minus 38 minutes is when the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load for tonight. SpaceX takes its pull electronically, so if it's in a good position to do so, it can do that pull early. But once the go-ahead is given, fueling begins at T-minus 35 minutes with the loading of RP-1, or a rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. And at the same time, liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes, they begin loading a cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage as well. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. They do the same thing on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes, second stage RP-1 loading concludes. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process gets underway. We see that visually manifest with the so-called big vent there. Starts at pad 40 around T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. Event lasts until about T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds when it starts to taper off. And conditions are right for the loading of liquid oxygen on board the second stage at the 16-minute mark. T-minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway at the base of the Falcon 9 first stage. SpaceX will flow a little bit of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank is full, and at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence. After pressurizing, we'll see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, reclines a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff. And at that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before launch, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true in the second stage, about a minute after that, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold-down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. This morning, looking for that liftoff at 1:14 a.m. Eastern, 0614 UTC, T-minus 48 minutes and 15 seconds. Now T-minus 47 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. SpaceX is running its countdown for this mission tonight from its site at Hangar X. It's the facility where it's working to concentrate all of its assets around Brevard County into one centralized location as they continue to build that footprint out. It's also where they refurbish their Falcon 9 first stage boosters and prepare them for future missions. SpaceX also has support from Hawthorne, California, its former headquarters. The booster flying today, notable because this will be the first time SpaceX launches one of its Falcon boosters for a 26th time. And as we have now a number of boosters that have crossed the 20 mission milestone, we're trying to keep a track of Falcon 9 frequent flyers here at Spaceflight now. B1067 holds that distinction right now with 25 missions under its belt, looking for flight number 26 today. It's followed up by a couple of boosters that are tied at 23 flights apiece. Those are B1063 and 1071. Coming in at the fourth spot is B1069, which has 21 missions to its name, and B1076, which has flown 20 times. As SpaceX works to certify its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights, we'll continue to keep tabs on the top 5 of the boosters that are among the currently still operating boosters in the fleet. That's the reason why you don't see B1061 or 1062 up here on the list, since those are permanently retired. Coming into tonight's launch, here's where the bar chart currently stands as far as Falcon missions this year as compared to years gone by. As indicated in the chart, and as I mentioned before, this will be SpaceX's 20th Falcon 9 mission so far on the year, as we're just about 30 minutes past midnight here on the East Coast on the 15th. Hope everyone had a wonderful Valentine's Day, whether you spent it with a loved one or just enjoyed some alone time, some quality alone time. Appreciate you being here with us, though, as we cruise on into a Saturday. Hope you have something fun planned after the launch, coming up here in 44 minutes and 12 seconds. Now T-minus 42 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. As I mentioned, this Falcon 9 rocket's going to be heading in a southeasterly trajectory. Let's give you a better picture of what that means. Talk a little trajectory. Falcon 9 rocket lifting off from the pad there at Space Launch Complex 40 or Slick 40. Once it leaves the pad, we'll follow that green arc. And at stage separation, the first stage booster, B-1067, will follow the red path on down to drone ship waiting for it, called a shortfall gravitas. If successful with this booster landing and recovery, this will be the 98th landing on this particular drone ship and the 409th booster landing for SpaceX to date. As mentioned, SpaceX is working on certifying its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights. Same is true for their payload fairings. SpaceX will, of course, attempt to recover these fairing halves after they splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. SpaceX saves about $6 million per recovery effort, so it's an important part of their business model to try and retrieve these and reuse them as much as possible. SpaceX doesn't often talk about the flight history of its payload fairings, but at last mention, as I recall it, the most flown fairing half that they discussed publicly was one that had flown, I believe, 23 times. Of course, the main part of the Falcon 9 rocket that is not reused on this or other missions is the second stage, powered by a Merlin vacuum engine, a modified Merlin engine designed for use in the vacuum of space. Our T-minus 36 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. At this point in the count, we would expect SpaceX to have concluded its go, no go poll for the start of prop load. As we're awaiting the anticipated start of fueling, it hasn't been quite as clear tonight if SpaceX is in a position to start fueling. Typically, around the 1 hour mark, we'll see a little bit of light venting at the pad around the, again, leading up to the 1 hour mark. Fortunately, though, it is a very clear night as far as heat distortion is concerned. So we've got some great visibility on the rocket this evening. In fact, to take a closer look at the vehicle, you can very distinctly make out the lettering of SpaceX as well as the American flag and the Falcon symbol up top. All good things as we're just a few seconds away from the believed to be start of fueling. T-minus 35 minutes and counting. So if SpaceX is in fact now fueling its Falcon 9 rocket, here's what we'll be seeing in the next couple of minutes. If you see just beneath the X in SpaceX, that's on the booster, see that lighter, those two light bands that run perpendicular across the rocket. That top one there, that's about where we'll start to see a frost line form, as well as a little bit of vapor in that area as the super cold densified liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage LOX tank. That visual will be a good confirmation that fueling is in fact underway. If SpaceX does need more time with today's mission, they do have a window that extends out till 2:15 this morning, as long as fueling has not begun. Now T-minus 32 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. You can definitely start to see some vapor forming in that area I was talking about on the Falcon 9 booster. It's a good visual sign and confirmation that tanking is now underway on the Falcon 9 rocket, which means SpaceX is locking into that T0 at 1:14 a.m. Eastern, 06:14 UTC. Now T-minus 29 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. Seeing some intermittent views of the moon here thanks to our friend Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions, obscured, unfortunately and uncontrollably, by some clouds that are moving across it from his vantage point. We'll come back to that as visibility becomes tolerable, as it is right now. Of course, for those who are keeping track of moon-bound activities, it's quite a busy time for lunar exploration right now with robotic resources. Just yesterday, or I guess now that it's Saturday here on the East Coast, on Thursday, Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost lunar lander has officially entered into lunar orbit, performing a 4-minute, 15-second lunar insertion burn. Now in a elliptical orbit around the moon. It'll spend the next 16 days going through some checkouts and circularizing its orbit as it prepares for its landing attempt, which is coming up on March 2nd in the early morning hours. 3:45 a.m. Eastern is when Firefly is going to target a landing on the moon's surface. Blue Ghost is going to be targeting a landing in an area of the moon called Mare Crisium. When it touches down on the 2nd, that'll be at the beginning of the lunar daytime. The lunar day lasts roughly 14 Earth days. And assuming a successful landing on the moon, it will operate for that full duration and roughly 5 hours into the lunar night. While on the moon's surface, it will attempt to image a solar eclipse where the Earth will obstruct the sun for just a little bit. And then it'll capture the lunar sunset on the 16th of March. So an eventful time for the Blue Ghost lunar lander, assuming it is able to have a successful touchdown on the moon's surface. Meanwhile, the other lunar rover, which launched at the same time as Blue Ghost, iSpace's Resilience lander, it's also on a longer path to get to the moon, set to have its lunar flyby that's coming up later today, as a matter of fact. Currently at a distance of a little more than 434,000 kilometers away from Earth at this point in time. And then coming up at the end of the month, we have another lunar lander that is going to be heading towards the moon. This one heading towards the moon's south pole. That is Intuitive Machines' IM-2 Nova C lander, which is named Addie, short for Athena. bringing it back to Earth with the current mission that we have on tap, Starlink 12-8. Let's take a look at the satellites on board. 21 Starlink V2 mini satellites make up the payload for this mission. Of those, 13 feature direct-to-cell capabilities. This will be SpaceX's 14th overall mission carrying Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. This will be the 13th that is a dedicated Starlink mission. Last year, SpaceX noted that they introduced what they call an optimized version of the Starlink V2 Mini. A little bit lighter than the previous version. These new optimized Starlinks weigh about 1,267 pounds or 575 kilograms. That said, SpaceX has not commented on how often it is flying the optimized version of the Starlink satellites, and if in fact that is what is launching on all of these missions, or if they are weaving some of those into certain Falcon flights. Either way, with their solar panels unfurled, these Starlink satellites have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use Argon Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. They were built in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. They'll be deployed at 180 miles or 291 kilometers in altitude at a 43 degrees inclination. Taking a look at the live chat here, I want to thank the little more than 2,300 of you who are either staying up late or getting up early to be with us for this launch. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. I also want to thank a few folks in the live chat for supporting us tonight. Thanks to Astro Joe, who's been with us now as a member here for 31 months, who says, geez, time flies when you're having fun. Another one of our mods, Jeff Hansen, with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Jeff, who says, Godspeed 1067 Workhorse. And yes, for those who were not with us when we talked about it earlier, this will be the 26th flight for SpaceX's launch leader and its Falcon fleet of boosters. Of those that are still flying, the next two that are behind this booster are B-1063 and 1071, which have each flown 23 times. Also want to thank Carter for a $2 super chat, who says, I'm about to watch this in IRL. Well, it's always good when you can see a rocket with your own two eyes, but for those who are not so fortunate as to be within visibility of this Falcon 9 rocket and see it for themselves, we're very happy to be with you to bring you as good of a vantage point as we can possibly offer. Now, T-minus 20 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. At this point, the chill down of the feed lines is underway. We'll see that visually manifest here in about 10 seconds with the so-called big vent. And there you see that vent getting underway. Good visual marker that fueling is moving along as expected. Now T-minus 17 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. We've got just a little more than a minute left on this vent as we're waiting for this to wrap up. Want to thank a few more folks in the live chat. Our thanks to channel member Michael McRory for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Michael. Who says, so cool that we can see rocket launches every couple of days. Things were not like that in the 1980s. Thank you, Spaceflight Now. And a thanks to Joni Mahoney, another one of our wonderful channel members, for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Joni, who says, Happy Valentine's Day, Will, Spaceflight Now, and the best space family. Hope for a great launch. And a happy Valentine's Day super chat from channel member I'm Lita as well. Happy Valentine's to you, Lita. T-minus 16 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. Just about 10 seconds away from this vent wrapping up as SpaceX is preparing to pivot over to second stage liquid oxygen loading. So far, it's been a smooth and unremarkable countdown, which is just what you want to see. Now T-minus 15 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. As I mentioned, this is going to be the record-setting 26th flight of this Falcon 9 first stage booster, B-1067 in the SpaceX fleet. So we've got quite a bit of history to cover. Let's go ahead and step lively through it as we get prepared to see its 26th liftoff and hopefully a good landing. Its flight history began all the way back on June 3rd of 2021 when it sent a Cargo Dragon spacecraft on its way to the International Space Station on the Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS-22 mission. That was followed up by another trip to the space station, this time sending a quartet of humans up to the ISS. That was the Crew 3 flight lifting off on November 11th. First flight that included a couple of members of the so-called Turtle class of astronauts. Rajat Chari and Caleb Barron on board that particular flight. That was followed up by the communication satellite Turksat 5B lifting off on December 19th of 2021. Another 4 astronauts heading up to the space station on the Crew 4 mission, launching on Dragon Freedom, which is in fact right now docked to the International Space Station, supporting the Crew 9 rotation. One more Dragon flight for this booster, CRS-25, another Cargo Dragon mission to the space station, lifting off on July 14th. That was followed up by this booster's first Starlink mission, Starlink 4-34, on September 19th. That was followed up by a mission for Eutelsat, Hotbird 13G. Mission for one of SpaceX's oldest customers, SES. The first 2 of the O3b mPOWER satellites lifting off on December 16th of 2022. Moving on to the next year, we had 3 Starlink missions back to back to back. We had Starlink 5-2 on January 26th, 5-5 on March 24th, and 5-9 on May 14th. That's followed up by the launch of the Satrius satellite for PSN, an Indonesian satellite telecommunications company. Back to Starlink land we go for 4 more missions. We had Starlink 6-10 on August 17th, 6-22 on October 13th, 6-29 on November 22nd, and 6-35 on January 7th. That was followed up by the launch of the Telkomsat Mariputa 2 communications satellite. Then back to Starlink land we go for a little bit. Starlink 6-45 on March 31st, 6-55 on May 3rd, 8-5 on June 5th. Got so many, we've got to flip to another page. We had 8-3 then on August 10th. Up next for this booster were a pair of navigation satellites, the Galileo constellation, FM-26 and FM-32. Satellite for South Korea, KoreaSat 6A, was up next. And then back to Starlink land we go for the most recent two launches. Starlink 6-70 on December 4th of last year. And then coming into this year, we had Starlink 12-12 on January 10th. Now T-minus 11 minutes, 25 seconds, and counting until the launch of Starlink 12-8. Now T-minus 10 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. Want to thank a few folks for their support. Our thanks to Stephen Ross for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Stephen, for supporting us at that level. Who says, thank you for all you do. Hope 2025 is a great year. See you guys at the next Starship launch. Thank you for... No, well, the message repeats again. So, thank you again. Carol DeFazio with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Carol. And thanks to Craig Corson for a £2 super chat, who says, Craig and Jen from Scotland watching the launch. Hello to all the folks in here watching from Scotland and elsewhere around the world. If you haven't already, let us know in the live chat where you are tuning in tonight. And as you are tuning in and getting ready to see this Falcon fly, let's go ahead and talk about the workhorse vehicle for SpaceX. The Falcon 9 rocket stands at 70 meters or 229 feet tall with a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that is made up by the Falcon 9's first stage. Bottom two-thirds of the rocket make up the first stage. At the base are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Again, tonight they are using a short fall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. At first stage, main engine cutoff. High-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the interstage adapter until stage separation. As we approach T-minus 7 minutes, it's just a point-in-time note. Right about now, they are beginning the chill-down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the first stage by flowing some liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. Moving up the rocket, though, the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 228,500 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 21 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. This engine burns the same prop mix, that being RP1 and LOX, same as the first stage. Following the deployment of the Starlink satellites, it will perform one last burn, a deorbit burn, helping to drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it will burn up, helping to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. As we're now past the 6-minute mark, at this point, the first stage RP1 tank should be topping off at this point. Coming back to the payload fairings, these are currently encapsulating the 21 Starlink satellites on this flight. They are made up of a carbon composite material and stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. 2 fairing halves will be recovered after they splash down under the support of steerable parachutes in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. SpaceX, of course, will attempt to recover these fairing halves and refurbish them and prepare them for a future flight. With now less than 5 minutes to go to the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. We're about 20 seconds away from hearing the call that the Falcon 9 is, or that the...
Tanks are pressing for strongback retract.
I was just searching for the words, and lo and behold, there we are. Pressurization getting ready for the retraction of the strongback there at pad 40. Cape Canaveral Space Force Station.
Strongback retract has started.
As we're getting some pad level views, Mission Audio want to address another little bit of housekeeping here before launch. You'll notice our clock in the upper right hand corner of the screen, a little bit different than what you're seeing there in the big box from SpaceX. Reason being, our clock is in real time. What's coming in from SpaceX is on a slight delay. You see those clamp arms there just beneath the payload fairings open up. As long as we're able to have tabs on the Falcon 9 rocket with our tracking cameras here on the ground, we'll be making our callouts based off of the real-time markers until we're solely relying on the SpaceX onboard cameras. About 3.5 minutes to go. I want to thank Start SharePoint for a $4 Australian super chat, and thanks as well to Talon Richardson for a $5 super chat. Less than 3 minutes.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Good call from SpaceX. We're just waiting for a similar call now for LOX load to wrap up on the second stage. T-minus 2 minutes. At this point, second stage LOX load should be complete. We'll hear that call from SpaceX here shortly.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
Good call. The Falcon 9 now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. We're seeing the ground gas closeouts. That's the additional venting here.
Ground gas closeouts.
T-minus 1 minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call from SpaceX. We're just waiting for the SpaceX launch director now to give their go for launch. Should be coming in the next few seconds.
Launch director, go for launch.
And with that, we are less than 30 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket from Pad 40 Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. 21 Starlink satellites on board, less than 20 seconds to go. 15 seconds. And here we go in 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on Starlink 12-8. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Now a
Vehicle is supersonic.
little more than a minute to flight. Rocket approaching max Q.
Max Q.
Good call from SpaceX. Shortly we'll hear the call out for MVAC chill as they condition the upper stage engine for the start of its burn. Now coming upon a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO. That'll be followed by stage separation, the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. The fairings will deploy just past the 3-minute mark.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
Good calls from SpaceX. Good visuals as well. About 10 seconds to fairing deploy.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And those Starlink satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this mission.
All the vehicles are on nominal trajectories.
With a call for nominal trajectory for both the first and second stages. The next milestone coming up is going to be right at the 6-minute mark, when 3 of the engines on the Falcon 9 first stage booster will come back to life for a roughly 28-second burn. That's the entry burn, beginning to slow the vehicle down as it makes its way towards the drone ship a shortfall of gravitas. First stage booster appears to have reached its apogee in the mission today at 113 kilometers, now beginning to make its descent. A little more than 4.5 minutes into the flight based off of the SpaceX timeline of events. 5 minutes in real time. For those just joining in the coverage at this point in time, the Falcon 9 first stage booster is a little less than 30 seconds away from the start of its entry burn, as B-1067 is attempting to make its 26th landing.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup. Entry burn shut down.
With the conclusion of that entry burn, we're now looking for the
Stage
start
1 trajectory nominal.
of the landing burn. Good call for
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
nominal trajectory. That second call, the FTS, or the flight termination system on the second stage, has been safed. No longer needed for this stage in flight.
Stage 1 transonic.
First stage booster now traveling below the speed of sound. Preparing for the start of that entry, or the landing burn, using just one of the Merlin engines at the base of the booster.
Stage 1 landing burn. Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Stage 2, terminal guidance.
And for 26th time, B-1067 has safely landed. SpaceX pulling away from its live feed of the upper stage there before making a call out on either the conclusion of that first burn, SECO, second stage engine cutoff, or calling out a nominal orbit insertion. Assuming that both of those were executed as intended, that upper stage will continue on with a coast phase that will last until T plus 54 minutes and 8 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn to help circularize the orbit. Then the Starlink satellites on board, all 21, are set to deploy around T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 17 seconds, with SpaceX set to confirm payload deploy shortly thereafter. And with that, we're going to go ahead and begin to wind things down. First, though, I want to thank a few folks in the live chat. Thanks to Clistia Lee for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Clistia. It says, go Falcon 9, go Starlink, and go B-1067. And I want to thank Gunnar S., another channel member, for a $5 super chat, saying, go Falcon 9 again. And with a good liftoff and landing of booster B-1067, let's go ahead and take a look at our mission stats as they currently stand. In addition to this being yet another record for this particular booster, this was also the 437th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 20th Falcon 9 flight of 2025, the 381st Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. No Falcon Heavies on the schedule just yet, so we're going to keep the orbital launch number paired along with the number of Falcon 9 launches at this point in time. This overnight flight marked the 139th SpaceX orbital launch within the last 365 days. Some Pad 40 stats. This was the 233rd SpaceX orbital launch from this pad, and the 287th overall orbital launch from Pad 40. Here's where the bar chart currently stands for SpaceX year compared to the years past. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 98th successful landing of a booster on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. This was SpaceX's 327th drone ship landing and their 409th overall successful booster landing to date. Finally, with some mission stats from around the globe, this was the 15th orbital launch from the Sunshine State, the 21st orbital launch from U.S. soil, 22nd from U.S. Rocket Company, and the 32nd launch attempt from around the world. So far, no failures from orbital launches. Here's where the pie chart currently stands. And with that, it is getting to be quite late here on the East Coast. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up for tonight's coverage. Want to thank those who were helping us out this evening. Thanks to our friend Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions for being on standby for tracking, although it was quite cloudy down there in southern Brevard County. But appreciate the moon as a point of conversation as we were cruising on through the count. Once again, I want to give big ups to our friend John Pisani for helping us out with tracking here at the press site in Adam Bernstein's stead. Thanks to our moderators in the live chat for helping us out there as well. Thanks to Callistia Lee, Jeff Hansen, Rick Donner, Astro Joe. Appreciate all of you. Thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, running the technical operations. Most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. Look forward to having you back with us next time SpaceX or any other launch provider here in the States is getting ready to launch. Many more orbital flights to come in the year 2025. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. Until then, bye-bye.